Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Tenora with DIY Blueprint Diva, and if you have been with me for episode 1, I'm finally ready to show you guys episode 2 of my Garage Makeover series. I finished putting up the wall panels, I put up some trim, I added some pegboards. I even started working on a couple other DIY projects for this garage, including this workbench right here, that I'll be posting in another episode. But for this episode 2, I'm finally in like a zone and a direction that I want to take this garage to make it my ultimate dream workspace. So if you are not subscribed to my channel, please consider subscribing, like this video, that way you can see all the other projects that I plan to do on my channel as well as in this garage. So I think that's it for now, and let's hop into the video. So if you remember at the end of episode 1, I had those 2 panels up and I talked about the garage lighting, which you can see shining on those panels. It's that yellow incandescent bulb that was standard for a garage. In addition, I had a yellow light for the garage door opener. But what I wanted to do was have the switch control the lighting in the garage. So I found this. It was a socket that fit into that fixture on the ceiling that also had 2 plugs on it. So the lighting that I used were 2 plug LED strip lights, as you can see there, and I was still able to put, a daylight or bright light LED bulb in there as well. The strip lighting was very easy to install. It had 2 holes on the back of it that I just measured and mimicked on the ceiling. I didn't have any studs where I needed them, so I just used the drywall anchors and screwed some screws in there enough to slide the light on. The fixtures are very lightweight, so I wasn't worried about, them being in the drywall or anything. I made sure I left enough of the cord available to reach the light fixture, and then I just tacked it up with a staple gun, and I made sure that the staple gun was wide enough to fit around the cord, so just be careful if you do staple a cord. And I showed you how it looks when I use the light, the actual switch to turn on the light fixtures, and it just made such a difference, especially being able to utilize the actual original fixture in addition to the garage lighting. Now I'm ready to finish the panels. When I was prepping for this, I should have known how easily it was to lift that panel, turn it around and maneuver it, because I hadn't been able to do it that easily. I also should not have tried to put this adhesive on the back of this panel while it was standing up, because I already knew it wasn't going to work. And then I ran out of adhesive. So I was almost done at that point. I should have just quit because I was tired and nothing was working out right. When I get the panel into place, I'm noticing that it's not leaning up flush against the wall. Then I'm realizing that the wall is uneven, the floor is uneven, and then the panel is short. So I'm thinking to myself, do I not use this panel? I didn't really think about how many I had left if I was going to run out. I went ahead and used it and just kept it moving because it is the garage and I could potentially cover it up with some trim. But then I took a step back and really debated ripping it off the wall and starting again. But I decided to just, keep it there, and I talked myself out of it, which was a good idea. It's not like I needed it to be perfect. But what I didn't take into account was that being that first panel was off and I didn't use a leveler, the second panel went on crooked as well. And it ended up leaving this gap at the bottom of the panel. The only thing I could think of was to hand saw it off. It was about maybe 1/4 of an inch that I hand sawed until it sat flush with the wall. Probably about 10 to 12 inches worth of elbow grease. I couldn't think of an easier way to do it, and that got the job done. After I finished with that panel, the rest of that wall was, smooth sailing. It was simply just, getting the next panel on. And I actually straightened that panel. I made sure that it was going to be straight so that the remaining ones on that wall would be straight. Once I got to the other side of the garage, this side has like a drop ceiling or a soffit. So all of the panels on this side will need to be cut. I ended up cutting the top of all of the panels on this wall and left the bottom straight so that the cut would show uneven at the top, and I could just cover that with the trim I was planning to put up. On this side of the wall there were two outlets, and one of the outlets was square and the other one was the original circle one. Well, I didn't think about that when I was cutting out the outlet hole because I didn't account for the faceplate having the two screws for the square outlet instead of the one. And I also didn't think that the floor was going to be this uneven all the way around, as you can see here. So what I ended up doing was cutting out enough of the hole to get the faceplate on, and then I just continued down the rest of the wall. Cutting the top of the panels, I used this 8-foot aluminum bar to cut a lot of these straight lines because I didn't trust myself doing anything by hand, being that the floors and the ceilings were so uneven. At least I knew my cut would be as straight as it could be. At this point, I've become a pro at putting that adhesive on the panel, but it was the last panel that I used to put the adhesive on. Once I figured out to just, put one nail in to get it in place where I needed it. Cutting the next outlet out was easy since I made my mistake the first time, and this only required the one screw anyway. I continued down the rest of the wall, and the only thing I had left was to do this peg wall. And of course, there's always time for a dance break. I ended up painting the wall where the peg wall was going to go because I didn't know if you were going to be able to see the drywall behind it. I also left a lip at the bottom that I wanted the peg wall to sit up on or above because there was no reason having a peg wall go all the way to the floor, because what can you put at the bottom of a peg wall? If you've never installed a pegboard before, I haven't either. It was fairly easy to do. I didn't have any studs where I needed them, so I used the drywall anchors around the perimeter of the board, which is probably about 3 on each side. And I went to Home Depot and found these spacers to give me that little gap behind the pegboard, which after I ended up buying a kit, there were some in there, but the ones I bought, of course, were a little bit more heavy duty. For the middle of the pegboard, I ended up just screwing one in the middle just to make sure that it stayed in place and made it a little bit more sturdy. Once I got that up, I put the last 2 corner pieces in, and cutting out those holes for the switch as well as the garage light was so much easier. The next thing is just getting my pegboard ready. I didn't want to leave it white, of course. I ended up going with this teal color paint, which I really love. It turned out really great. I used a foam roller at first and it wasn't going on smooth like I wanted it to, so I ended up switching to a regular nap roller. After the second coat, I was satisfied with the turnout. I probably will go back with the clear coat because I didn't at this point. I noticed that it did kind of scratch easily, being that I was putting all of my tools up there. But it's not a big deal for me. It's something that I want to do, but if I don't end up doing it, I'm perfectly okay with that. The next thing I wanted was to frame this thing out. So I ended up buying some lattice, this white lattice from Home Depot, and making a frame out of it for the pegboard. I was going to use this as my trim also, but some of the areas, like the panel that was cut short, that lattice would not fit right there, so I had to come up with something else to use as my trim. So why not utilize it for something else? I framed out this pegboard, and then I also made another one on the opposite side of the room, which would house all of my rulers and T-squares, and I did that in the opposite color wave of this one. So the frame, I ended up painting the teal color, and I left the pegboard white. It's so cute. The last thing I had to do was finish up the trim. My auntie had these peel and stick wood that she wasn't using, so of course I asked for it. It was a perfect fit as my trim pieces. You can see here as I got down the wall, these were the standard 96-inch panels, but I still had a gap at the ceiling, which means between the floor and the ceiling something was uneven. These are supposed to be 8-foot ceilings. So that piece of trim actually worked perfectly in filling that space, at least enough to where I was satisfied with it. I was able to cut these on my miter saw very easily. There wasn't an issue with the adhesive on the back. Once I got that last piece in, I was done, you guys. Oh my gosh, I was just happy to be done. I was just so happy to be done going up and down that ladder, or moving it all over the place, dragging it with me, dragging it everywhere I went in that garage. So if you remember from episode 1, I had everything literally along the perimeter of the garage. Condensed all of that, got rid of it. I sold some of the furniture pieces, and the result, although you still see all of my wood that I've acquired, it's definitely cleaned out a lot more. It's more organized, and it just looks so amazing. It's brighter in there. It just gives me a good feeling. It's like I almost don't feel like I'm in a garage, but more so my workshop, which is the intent that I was going for. And my peg wall turned out so good. I'm still rearranging it, you know, getting the feel for where I want things, what I use the most. But I love the way it turned out, both of them. I added the dry erase board, and I framed that out with some foam trim that I found at Lowe's, and it's really lightweight. It's a foam composite, and I easily cut it using the miter box, not knowing what I was going to use it for, but I'm so glad that I picked it up because it ended up being a nice contrast with the other trim that I use in the garage. You remember from episode 1, I kind of did a mock-up in Photoshop of what I had in my mind, like what I envisioned for my garage to look like. It's so neat to see it look so similar to what I envisioned in my head, and this is only just like the midway point. You guys, I laughed so hard at myself when I was going through these videos. I really thought I was about to break my garage door because it was going, and I kept pressing it and stopping it and pressing it. It was a disaster. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please like it and subscribe if you aren't already, and turn on your notifications so you know when I upload the next video for this garage makeover series, as well as other DIY projects that I've been doing along the way in between this big project. See you next time, guys, for another DIY. So if you are ready for episode 2. Why is this so hard? I hate this, gosh. I hate it. Hate it! Crickets. Can you hear the crickets? Delete, 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 delete.